Hello. In this video we're going to take a look at a couple of the examples that were added to the Cocos2d for iPhone sample loader for RUBE scenes. That's the RUBE Box2D editor. And these two scenes at the bottom here are specifically set up to show how you can use the Box2D editor to make menus and user interface controls and things. This is not really any kind of API or anything like that, or it's not even a recommendation to say you should do this or anything like that. It just came about because these were added or they were created for the Downhill Supreme game that I worked on earlier this year, and I thought they'd be quite handy for other people to take a look at and to see how you can set up a menu using the Box2D editor, which is quite a neat thing to do actually, because you can make the buttons, you can give them physical characteristics because it's it's Box2D, right? So anyway, the two menus that we have here excuse me, are simple menu demo, which is indeed very simple. It's just a button that you click and it takes you back to this main menu. The other one is UI controls, which is a little bit more involved. We have some joints, and we can see there when I move this dial, the log at the bottom is updating to show me the angle of the dial and the position of the slider and so on. And I can pop up another panel like this and then go back to the main menu. So those scenes were both set up in the editor and loaded, and they both use this new class that's been added to the sample loader project called button RUBE layer. And we're going to have a look at that and see how to set up a scene or a menu screen of our own. So first let's look at how this one works here, simple menu demo, and to do that we'll need to go into RUBE and open the file for that, which is SimpleMenu.RUBE in the source code tree for this project. If you don't know about this project or where to get it or how to set it up or anything, I will pop up a link annotation around about here right now in this video so that you can go and check that out, and I'll probably link to it in the video description as well. Anyway, so SimpleMenu.RUBE is the RUBE file for the scene. Let's open that up. So we can see we have just one square fixture in the screen and a couple of images and some sensor fixtures around the outside. Now these sensor fixtures around the outside, they don't play any part in anything at all in the scene once it's loaded. They're only here so that whoever's making this menu screen knows where the boundaries of the screen are going to be. In this case we have three screen ratios, aspect ratios. They are iPad, iPhone, and then iPhone 5. So this is getting a little bit specific to iOS at this stage, which is, this is what the Downhill Supreme was set up for iOS to begin with. So if you are using RUBE for other screen aspect ratios or other operating systems or whatever, this might not be exactly what you need, but for iPhone it should be quite handy. So we have here one body and one fixture and one image, and they're all attached together, so I can move them around like this if I should want to. And the main point of this is the fixture. If I select this fixture and then I look at the properties for this fixture here, we can see there are two custom properties, and these are string properties. And we have one called screen change and one called action. So the one we have set here is screen change, and this is the name of a class in our project, which should be a CC layer or subclass of CC layer. And when we use this as a button, when we touch this one, it's going to try and find this class and make an instance of that class the main scene of the program. So we're going to switch to that screen basically. That's why it's called screen change. The other thing we can do is we can put this is another text property here, we can put the name of a selector, that is a method, in the class of this screen, and we can call that method to do something. So let's add, so what's this image down here for then? If I switch to images mode for a second, we can see that these two images here are named the same, except for the one at the bottom has underscore hover after the name. The way this works is that if there is a underscore hover version of an image that is attached to that button, then this will be shown while the touch is pressed down on the button. So if I go back to the iOS simulator for a minute, if I just click the mouse here and hold it, you'll see that this is like the touch down state for this button, and I can move away from this button and come back, and it works. I think this is the standard way that buttons work. It doesn't take any action unless you release the mouse. You press and release over both the press and the release should be over the button in order for it to function. So if I release the mouse here, nothing will happen. But if I press and then go away and then come back and release, then it will function. So this image down here can be some sort of a mouse over well, it's not mouse over because it's a touch screen, but you know, a pressed down kind of a version of the button. So that's what the image down there is for. Okay, so let's duplicate that, and we'll try using the action instead. So to duplicate this whole thing, I'm going to select bodies and then duplicate, and I'm going to bring this over here, and I'm going to call it, it actually doesn't matter what the body is called. The important things are, if you want to use a pressed down state, you'll have to give it a unique name for that. So I'm going to call this button 2. This is the image I'm naming here, and then I'm going to copy this image over here, and I'm going to call this button 2 hover. Now for this image and this image, I'm going to select both of those. Oops. I'm going to select those two images, and I'm going to change the file to what have we got here? Let's get in the right folder. Resources, images, people. So I'm going to make this button start the pinball layer eventually. Actually, I said I was going to make it do an action, so let's do the action first. Okay, so back in Fixtures mode, let's delete this, and we'll make this call a selector called do something. Now we haven't made that selector yet, so we'll have to make that. But anyway, we'll save this scene and then export it. Save raw info, and we need to just check where we are, make sure we're in the right place. Resources, and I want to overwrite this file here, SimpleMenuJSON. Okay, I'll save that there. Replace. So do something. Alright. Now we'll come into our class file that we're using for this layer, which I have not shown you yet, but let's take a look at that. It's called menu screen RUBE layer. So there's not really too much to this. It extends button RUBE layer to get all the functionality of buttons, and then in the class itself we have just the two standard things. We need to return an instance of this class when the scene method is called, and we also should specify what file is going to be loaded for the screen. So there's just those two methods. That's the bare minimum that you need here. But what we want to do is call a selector called do something. So let's add that to our class, and I will do something. Okay, so now we have a selector, and this name here is matching the name that we just gave it to the fixture there in our RUBE scene, right? Double check, yes. Yes. Okay, now if everything's going well, we should just be able to run this project now. And if I come back into my simple menu, now we have two buttons, and if I click on this one, we should see in the debug log we have do something. So this button that we set up purely in the Cocos2d editor has now been given some functionality in our program, just based on the visual editor settings that we gave it to it in the custom properties. Okay. What else can we do? I might just give this image down here a little bit of a color tint so I can see when it's being touched. So that will be green when the touch is down on it. And I'll make one more of these buttons, and I'll bring this over here, and I will also duplicate this image down here again, and then these two images I will give those a different file, and I will make them this image here, planet cute person, and this is a little bit small, so I'm going to scale it up there so that it fits a little bit better. And because these are just normal fixtures that you can edit in the same way as any other fixture in the RUBE editor. You can do things like this and make whatever shape of buttons that you feel is necessary. This could of course be a circle if it fits better. Notice that the size of the hover image at the bottom here excuse me, here is not relevant, because what happens when you press the button is basically just uses a different texture file and different color tint, that's all. So the size excuse me, jeez, the size of the images down the bottom here will just be set to whatever the size of these ones is at the top. So we need to remember to give these different names though, because otherwise the hover states will be all messed up. So this is button 3, this is image, yes, okay, and this image is going to be called button 3 hover. Now what I'm going to make this button do, if I change to fixtures mode here, remember it's the fixture that causes the button action to occur, because the fixture defines the space on the screen for this button. So I'm going to take this action out, and I'm going to make this one start the planet cute. Oops, planet cute RUBE layer, and this one I'm going to take away this do something now, and I'm going to make this one start the SimpleMenuRube layer. So those should function as like a menu to start up those other scenes. And since I said I've got a dry throat or something, since I said that we could do funny cool things with these bodies, let's make them both dynamic. And this one here, I'm going to give him a gravity scale of 0, linear damping of 10, fixed rotation, so I can drag him around in the screen. And for this one over here, I'm going to add a rope joint. So I'll select those two bodies and then add a select both of those bodies, add a rope joint. Then in joints mode I will set this like that, and then need to set the length like that, and we can just quickly run this to check that it's working okay. Don't mind the missing window frame there. I'm recording this on Linux over the network using VNC, so it's a little bit funny sometimes. But the point here is that we can, let me turn fixtures on, so we can move this around. So you can let users position buttons where they like to have them, and basically, yeah. So even after we give things physical characteristics, they still function perfectly the same as buttons. So let's save this and export, and then come back to our Xcode project and run that. And notice that we didn't need to change anything in Xcode here. All we did was edit the scene in RUBE. So now if I come down here, we should find that when I mouse over this, or when I press it rather, it turns green, and I can drag it around the scene. And the slightly unfortunate thing is that as soon as I let go now, it's going to cause that action to execute and take me to the pinball scene. So if you do want to use this kind of feature to let your users move buttons around and customize the user interface as they see fit, you'll have to put in a little bit more work to make sure that while they're dragging this, when they let go, it doesn't actually cause the button to execute. And you'll also have to make sure that they can't drag it off the screen, because it's pretty easy to do that. As you can see, I could put it wherever I like, so you might want to build walls around the screen so they can't do that. But anyway, so this one here is the same. Yeah, it's a button on a rope, and if I click this, that will take us to the Planet Cute scene. So that's basically how all this stuff works. To make your own screen here, all you really need to do, I won't actually do it because it's so simple, but in Xcode, oh come on, oh well, right, in Xcode you can come in here and click New File, and then you'll choose Objective-C class and make a subclass of button RUBE layer. I'm not going to do that, but after you've made a subclass of button RUBE layer, you'll need to rename the file extension to .mm. So in this case, menu screen RUBE layer is the file that we've just been using. That's a .mm. And then you'll need to implement these two methods here, get file name and scene. Actually, I will just do one of those, just to, since you're watching this video for so long, let's do that. Objective-C class, another simple menu layer, subclass of button RUBE layer, put it in this folder, yes, and then in, where did that go? All the way down here, okay. So now this needs to be mm, and then in this file we need to implement the get file name and the scene functions. And they actually originate in RUBE layer, or basic RUBE layer. So I'm just going to copy them from RUBE layer here and into my new layer here. Oops. I'm going to slap those in there, and I'm going to say that this is well, whatever. So at this point, you know, you need to make another scene, and you need to export that and add it to your project and so on. But yeah, basically that's all there is to setting up another layer. Actually, we need to do this, don't we? Oh, and we don't need that either. Okay, so that's basically all you need to do to set up another menu screen. Now there is another way you can do it. What we've just done here is we've explicitly set the file name for the screen, and this is what you would do if your menu was acting as the main screen for the app. But you can also add a menu layer over the top of another layer as a child, and I'll just demonstrate that because it's quite handy as well. As we can see here, button RUBE layer has this initializer here, init with JSON file, and this is a class method. So what I'm going to do here as a demonstration, I'm going to make it so that when I click to start the Planet Cute RUBE layer, we will have the menu still showing. So it's going to be like a child of this layer. And to do that is pretty simple. In Planet Cute RUBE layer, we need to obviously import what was that called? Menu screen RUBE layer. Okay, so that's our class for the menu screen, and then we need to do something like this: menu screen RUBE layer, menu layer equals, oops, and we'll use that class method init with JSON file to do this. And what was it called? Simple.json. And then we'll add it to the scene as a child. Like that. So this is the other way that you can make a menu screen. So just to demonstrate how that works, we will build and run again. So this time when we start the Planet Cute demo, we should see that both of these layers are functioning together. So I can move, oops, oh come on. Hopefully this is just VNC being silly. Alright. Tends to freeze up sometimes because I'm accessing it over the wireless network as well, which is probably a little bit slower than wired. Anyway, so we have these buttons here, and it may be a little bit confusing, but basically we have the Planet Cute RUBE scene running in the background as normal, and then on top of that we have our menu screen as well, and the touches are going through at the moment. So like I say, this oh, we can click this, yeah, that's right. Yeah, like I say, this is not really presented as any kind of a serious API. It's just something that I thought could be handy for people to take a look at and perhaps use. So that's basically how all that stuff works. I'll just take a very quick look at this because this is quite handy, and this is also something that we used in Downhill Supreme, which I can take a look at here actually. Oh come on. Alright, so in Downhill Supreme what we did for this screen was basically exactly the same thing as I'm about to look at in this example. We have, you know, buttons and everything working just like we saw, and you may have noticed that these clouds can be moved around like this, and this is all working just by using a prismatic joint in the RUBE scene. And also very, very slowly you can see the rays of the sun here rotating there. This is just a large image sitting on a rotating body in the middle of the screen. So that's the background for where this menu system came from. Let's go back to our project here. Okay, so I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but basically there's a prismatic joint here. We could at least look at the project, I suppose. This is called UI controls. Okay, so basically we have very similar to what we had just before, except this time we've got some joints set up in a little bit more of a careful careful construction. We have a revolute joint in the middle here with some limits letting us rotate this dial around to a certain extent, and then we have a slider here, prismatic joint, and this also has limits as well, just letting us slide this to the end of the dial. So once again you can test these all in the player view to check that you've got them working before you run it in your app. So the main difference here, or the main addition, is that these joints obviously have names, and we're going to get a reference to these joints when we load this scene, so that we can call get joint angle in the case of this dial and get joint translation, I think, for prismatic joints, and that will let us see how far along the slider is so that we can adjust the volume and whatever we need to do with the slider. The button in the top is just an exit button to go back to the screen before, and the button over here on the right is just a switch to toggle the position of this kinematic body here. So when this is clicked once, this kinematic body will slide up to +2 position here, and if you touch it again it'll slide down. And because this is all a physical construction, it's pretty easy just to do the same thing as we just did, the same thing as we just had for the dial above, and make some revolute joints or prismatic joints or whatever you need here to make some controls. So if we look at the source code for this, this is UI controls RUBE layer. Actually we'll look at the header first. So we just have some values for the last scene slider and dial positions, and a boolean value to decide or to store whether the sliding drawer at the bottom is showing or not. And then we have the 2 joints and the kinematic body for the drawer. And in the implementation file we have after load processing. So obviously here the first thing we must remember is to do whatever the superclass does. So that's super afterload processing. And then we just look in the scene and we try and locate the 2 joints and the body that have those names that we gave them in the editor. Toggle drawer, this method here is called by clicking this button here. If I look at the fixture for this button, we'll see that it has action toggle drawer set, and that will change the value of that boolean variable. And then every time step we do 3 things. Must call the superclass first, or at least at some point usually. Then all we do is, if we found a dial joint when we loaded the scene, then we check if the value has changed since we last saw it, and we do log, just to log the degrees. And the same thing for the slider. If the value has changed, then we just print out a log saying what the value is now. These values here, obviously you'll need to do something a little bit more clever than this, like obviously if it's a volume you want it to go from 0 to 100% or something, so you'll have to scale the value that you get from this get joint translation down to be in the range 0 to 1 or whatever you need to do. And finally, for the kinematic body at the bottom there, if we manage to find that when we loaded, look at the value of the Boolean value to tell us whether it should be showing or not, and also the position, and then we just set the linear velocity of the body to go whichever direction it should. So that's about all the coding that's necessary to get that to work, and the rest of it all is just graphical editing stuff in the RUBE editor to lay it out and get things working how you want. And so, sound's going a bit funny. So basically, yeah, that's that. What was I going to say? I don't think there's too much else to say about this. As usual, if you have any comments or questions or anything, take a look at the forums at iforce2d.net/forums, and there will be a whole bunch of similar topics possibly about this, and if there's not, you can make one. So, thanks for watching.